Hey guys, lepedaler back with another video. Today I'm going to be telling you guys my top 5 bike upgrades that you guys can make during 2020. So without further ado, let's get right into this video. So the first upgrade that I would actually suggest you guys do is get a bike fit. And you might wonder, what is a bike fit? And that's basically when you measure, saddle height, so how tall your saddle is on your bike, the arm reach of how close are your arms when they're extended in the hoods. So, a lot of this is technical, so if you are new to cycling, don't stress it. You'll figure it out, especially if you go to get a professional bike fit, which I do suggest if you have the money or you're new to the sport, just because that money will go a long way in ensuring that you don't injure yourself if you don't get a bike fit right away, because I've experienced this myself when I was new to cycling. I didn't really have my fit dialed in, and I didn't take it upon myself to do a lot of the research because it seemed a lot of confusing information to take in all at once. So I got a bike fit, and it was relatively expensive. I would say around $200, $300. But the fit that they got me on was really good as an initial fit to get comfortable, and it actually promoted me being more comfortable and doing more riding. So it definitely did pay, because I did end up cycling a lot more because I felt a lot more comfortable on the bike. However, if money is tight, or you rather do it yourself and learn, there's tons of information online, and that I hopefully will post in the near future of how to do a basic bike fit so you guys can get a little bit more comfortable. And one thing that I find super important with bike fit and bike sizing and all that good stuff in terms of position on the bike is that a lot of it is trial and error. So, when I'm on my bike, even if I did get a professional bike fit, they only are with me for a specific period of time. They're not going to be with me for the whole season, and there's different things that happened during the season. Maybe my flexibility, 1 month or 2 months I was doing a lot of yoga, doing a lot of stretching, and then I don't do that. So you got to tweak your position around. So that's why it's really important that I suggest even myself and you guys too, is that start learning these things. And like I said, I'll post content about this, but learning how to tweak your position on your bike is super important, because comfort is something that isn't always an ongoing thing, and it really depends on the feedback that your body feels. So it changes very often, and that's why spending money on a bike fit is sometimes very expensive. Maybe if it's done once a season, I can it's justified. But if you guys can learn the skill, it's really important, because you save money and you'll probably be more comfortable. Not only is bike fit important for your position on the bike, but often people overlook the saddle and the stem. So sometimes when you do a bike fit, they'll try to oversell you on maybe a saddle or a stem, but a lot of times you guys can figure that out yourself, and that usually comes down to riding a saddle. So depending on your local bike shop or wherever you shop, I know at bike shops that I've been at, they have a saddle program where they actually have tester saddles that you can borrow for a time period, actually test it out, and then make an informed purchase, or say, no, I don't think that's the right saddle, let me try another one. And I find that so important and so necessary, because a saddle is so personal, because you're spending hours on this thing, and it has your most important contact points on the bike, which is super important if you want to stay comfortable and you don't want to feel uncomfortable. So a saddle, figuring out a proper saddle, this goes in with the bike fit, but super important upgrade, because I at one point was on a very narrow saddle. Now we're getting really used to wider saddles. It's becoming a lot more predominant amongst cyclists, because I have pretty wide sit bones, and I was using a very narrow saddle, and it was super uncomfortable. Fellow riders I would ride with say I was rocking, and eventually when I did go for a bike fit and upgraded my saddle, I got a wider saddle, and I haven't had that problem since. So a bike fit shows you these problems that you might not otherwise be able to self-identify. So that's why, yet again, getting a professional bike fit sometimes help, because you have someone that's going to be objective and say, no, your position doesn't look too good, where on yourself it gets a little harder. And the last thing I'd like to touch on for bike fits is stem length is super important too. So depending on how far forward or how far back your arms are can make a big difference. So sometimes people have to get a shorter stem or a longer stem, depending on comfort, neck pain. I'm not a professional bike fitter by any means of the word, but I have a basic understanding, and a lot of the times things that do come on stock bikes, depending on the size, so small, medium, large, extra large, the stem increases according to the size. So usually they get it pretty spot on, but as the older you get, depending on how flexible you keep yourself, how much yoga, how much stretching you guys do, you guys can get kinks in your necks, your backs. I've experienced it. So it really depends, and that's why having a bike fitter really help you identify those things can help also. But like I said, you can do this yourself also. Just you have to be a little bit more vigilant and more critical on your overall comfort and that stuff. So just keep that in mind. One thing that people always forget to mention with bike fits and why it's so important to actually work on your position on the bike is not only do you become more comfortable, which means you can ride more and enjoy the sport more and cycle more, but you actually can produce more power. So if you're in a position that's super uncomfortable or you feel that's limiting your abilities to produce power, if you figure out a good position, and if that's done with a professional bike fit or you tweaking your position by yourself, you'll actually put out more power because you'll be more comfortable and it'll actually enable you to do so, which people never talk about. People are always quick to talk about, a new rim set or new upgrades to their bikes, lighter this, lighter that, more aerodynamic this, more aerodynamic that. But they usually forget something that's very basic, that, at the end of the day, you're the one putting out the power. So if you can get a bike fit and, or work on your position and produce 50 to 100 more watts for an effort because you're more comfortable and you're not really stiff, that is huge. So I suggest highly that you guys look into that for the first upgrade. So the second upgrade that I would suggest you guys get is a cycling computer. Now, this is super important for not only tracking your rides, but also for directions. And this goes into the third upgrade. So a little bit of a spoiler alert, but you should get a cycling computer that has power. Or that can read power. So this is a Garmin 520. It's a cycling computer that I've had for a couple of years now, and it is an amazing device. They're going relatively cheap right now, so definitely do some research on that one. There's other companies such as the Wahoo Element Bolt and whatnot, and Garmin and Wahoo are pretty much the biggest cycling computers. You can use your phone. I'm just not too sure if it can register power. It probably can, but for what is norm in the cycling scene, it is Garmin and Wahoo. So having a cycling computer is just amazing because it's an easy way of tracking your fitness. It's an easy way of seeing your stats in real time. I do have people, fellow cyclists, that use their phone to do some of the stuff on various apps, but not only do I feel like it's very big and very top and heavy on the front of the bike, but it's just not designed for that, right? So, it's very nice to be disconnected. And this goes a little bit more off topic, but when I have a cycling computer and that's the only thing I'm looking at, I'm not going to get distracted with text messages or check anything else. It's very simple. I just look and I'm riding, right? So I like having that distinction between my phone, which is for emergencies or to contact someone if they contact me and it's important, and my cycling computer that's dedicated for cycling. So try to get a cycling computer that has power, and it's relatively new because with newer GPSs and cycling computers, they'll have maps, and turn-by-turn navigation is super nice when you do create loops around your area to ride, training loops. It's really nice to have turn-by-turn navigation rather than having to check your phone when to turn. So it's not only good for stats when you're riding, such as average speed, total kilometers, power output, heart rate, all that good stuff, but then you can actually explore, not get lost, and it's just awesome to have. So the third upgrade I would suggest you guys get is a power meter, and I'll give a quick rundown of what a power meter is. So on your bike, you have two crank arms, one left, one right, and depending on the power meter, there's single-sided power meters, which means only one crank arm has power, or there's dual-sided, which means both arms have a device on them that can register power. Or sometimes you actually have pedals that are power meters also, and they have gauges in them that can, determine how much power you're putting out. So a power meter is basically determining how much power, how much effort is actually going through the pedals and how much you're actually producing. So the unit that's power is measured in is called a watt. So the higher the watts, the more effort, and the lower the watts, less effort. And why a power meter is so important and can, revolutionize cycling is because you can actually pace yourself better. So instead of, blowing yourself up a climb and then feeling exhausted, you can really pace yourself to something that you can hold and that you're comfortable with. And the reason why I find this so important, I know a lot of people are saying, no, I just want to ride, I don't want to look at numbers and all that stuff. I totally understand. And there's days that, I just want to ride. I don't care about how much power I'm putting out. I don't care even about my speed. I just want to ride and enjoy and not think about that stuff. So I totally agree there. There's days where you want to do that. But I would say in overall, what makes those days where you can just forget about power so enjoyable is because you've worked continuously with numbers to increase your fitness to the point where, those, couple days in the month where you just want to ride and have fun, you're not struggling up hills because you've used those numbers in training to actually gauge efforts and become a stronger cyclist. So it's like a double-edged sword. You want to have it, but at the same time, sometimes you don't. And, that always comes down to the rider of how much you want to pay attention to the numbers. So I think a power meter is super important because, if you're just riding and you're not riding with purpose, and you're hindering your performance because every time you ride you're just smashing yourself up climbs, and you're really not gauging efforts where one day you're doing 3 efforts and the next day you're recovering, and like so on and so forth. If you're just trying to go out every day without a plan, you'll never really have a smooth progression in terms of fitness. So a power meter is really important just because it helps with the overall growth of fitness. It's a very good pacing tool. And I'm going to make a video eventually talking about, power zones. So please subscribe to the channel and like this video just because it helps with me putting out more content. But this stuff is super important because, later on, as you guys get more into the sport, you'll figure out exactly what all these things are, and, you'll have a lot more fun time on the bike. So a power meter is not super expensive. I myself got one last season. It was a single-sided power meter, and it was around $200-300. And, that tool goes a long way just because you can actually see what you're actually doing. So no longer will you be riding for speed, because speed always depends on gradient, wind. Heart rate is somewhat reliable. If you have a heart rate strap that measures how many beats per minute your heart's going, like that's somewhat reliable, but it can change on, if you had coffee, depending on when you sleep, time of day. There's lots of variabilities. So a power meter never changes. Watts are watts. 100 watts on a hill is 100 watts on a flat. So it's a really good training tool. And I would say out of this whole list, I'd say a power meter is probably the most important thing that will revolutionize your cycling, just because if you can, slowly increase and become a better overall cyclist, anytime you're on a bike, it's going to be more enjoyable. Because anyone that says, numbers are not important, you should just ride, I agree with them. But if you're struggling up a hill continuously because you don't know how to pace it, and you're going 30 seconds full attack, and then you get burnt out and you have to walk up it, I wouldn't say that's fun. So I'm on both camps. I love power, I love numbers, but I also like just riding and enjoying. So there has to be a nice balance between both, and just keep that in mind. But I would also say for power, you need a good cycling computer to get the information from your power meter to your cycling computer. So you need a cycling computer and you need a power meter. So the fourth upgrade that I would suggest you guys get is a good set of tires. So why tires are so important, and often people overlook that, is because those are the only parts of the bike that are actually coming in contact with the ground. So a lot of the ride quality actually comes from tires, and that's why a lot of people forget that, if you put a good set of tires rather than the ones that maybe come stock on your bike or that comes with your bike, you're going to have a lot more enjoyable ride quality, and a lot of the features that might have been suppressed because of the stock tires are not really made for performance. They're really just made to having a tire come on the bike does not increase the overall price of the bike is super important, because a lot of times I currently have stock tires on my bike right now, and I would say they're fairly decent, but I've ridden with Continental GP 4000s, and now I've ridden with 5000s as well, and I love those tires because they're so responsive, they grip really nice, and the ride quality is really great on them. And I've also ridden with Vittoria Corsa tires also. So tires really add a significant flair. I would use tires, the way I would use the analogy is, when you add spices to foods, that's how tires give spice to your bike. They really accent a lot of the qualities that come on your bike that might have been suppressed with a stock tire. So if you guys are looking for a cheap upgrade, you can probably get a decent tires for around $150-200, and that will probably last you a season depending on how much you ride. But tires are very often overlooked, and I eventually do plan on making a video about tires, so like the video and subscribe to the channel because that content will be coming out. The fifth and last upgrade is a new wheel set. So, a rim set will make a big difference because the lighter the wheels, the overall snappier feel that your bike will have, because if you can reduce the weight, it will make the overall performance of your bike a little bit nicer. Then again, I would say this is the last upgrade on the list because it's relatively cheap to do, but then again, it's not totally necessary because you want something that's at least 1,500 grams in totals in terms of both wheels. So a wheel set has to be around 1,500 grams, in my opinion, to give a significant, improvement of overall ride quality. But, a lot of times you'll have a, training wheel set, and a race wheel set. But if you're not racing, I usually find the stock rims that do come on bikes pretty good. If you guys really end up keeping your bike for a while, I would say more than 2 seasons, and they came with aluminum rims or alloy rims, I would suggest, at that point, potentially upgrading to carbon, but I would not say it's necessary. I just put in this video because a lot of times that's like one last upgrade that people like to do that really does improve overall ride quality, and it just really depends on what type of performance you want, depends on how deep the rims you want, because I've touched up on this on other videos, but shallow rims are really good for climbing, and then deeper rims are obviously better for aerodynamic benefits, and it really depends on what you're doing. So are you doing a mix of rolling flats and a little bit of hills, or is it pure climbing, or is it pure just flats? So it really depends. It gets really specific, and it really comes down to the type of riding that you do. So that about wraps it up for the top 5 bike upgrades that I would suggest you guys look into. If you guys did like the video, please smash the like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps with me putting out more content like this. So if you guys did enjoy it, stay tuned because a lot more content like this is coming out. Comment anything I might have missed or overlooked, or that you guys find super important in terms of upgrading your bike. And until the next one, keep on pedaling.